side. Good day, my friends. It's Billy Mandarino, the NOW-IST, and you're on the NOW-IST Experience podcast. I'm so excited today to have one of my closest brother friends, if you will, soul brother friends, Patrick Mosier, the incredible Patrick Mosier. And we have around like a 4-year history together, but it feels like an eternity because there's no time in the present moment. There's only this moment, and this moment for you is going to be special. So grab the notes on your phone, grab a piece of paper and a pen or pencil, because you're going to want to take some notes, because prepare to have your mind just expanded with my dear friend, Patrick Mosier, and what he has to offer is unexpected. It's, as it says behind him, extraordinary today. And this moment is going to be extraordinary because when he and I get together, I don't know, they're just crazy things, spark fly out of my ears and halos around his head. And so just prepare yourself. And Patrick, my brother Mosier, will you just fill in everybody about you and your heart and your focus and your mission?
Wow, that's a big question, but I'll do my best to compact all that into a thumbnail. So let's see. I was born in Chicago. No, we won't go with that. I was so let me say give you some of the turning points that defined my journey, I guess. So I was painfully shy in grade school and high school. And I've asked that question, you know, who in here was a wallflower? And people raise their hands. It's like, if you're raising your hand, no one knew you, because no one knew who I was. And I actually had this coping mechanism that I'd walk through the halls, and I was literally that kid that people would bump into, and I dropped my books, and they would not see that happen because I was so invisible. So I had this thing called invisible strength. I would walk through the halls and grasping my books and going, I have invisible strength. They just can't see it. And that was a good coping mechanism, but it also prevented me from engaging too. So it was a good coping mechanism, but it also was holding me back. And so when I graduated from high school, I went to a very good high school. It was rated number 7 in the country. And my high school, we had 285 other boys. I went to an all-boys school, and there was, we got ranked, ordered every semester and cumulative. And when I got rated my last semester, senior year, I was number 6 in my class. So theoretically speaking, I was rated one of the top 50 students in the country.
Whoa.
Now, here's the issue with this. I learned how to work hard. I did my first all-nighter as a sophomore in high school because I just cared about grades and I cared about excelling. And I wasn't naturally smart, book smart, test smart.
Interesting.
And so in this high school that I went to, there were kids that just were in the football team and kind of glided through class. And they got great scores on SATs and the ACTs and all the standardized testing. I went to my high school, we had 2 kids that got perfect scores on both English and math.
Wow. So
when I graduated, all my, I wouldn't say friends because I was a wallflower, but all these other people I knew were getting 4-year scholarships to Stanford and Harvard and Yale and Northwestern, Carnegie Mellon. And I was like, okay. And I got a half-year scholarship to University of Cincinnati. And that's when I realized it's like all this hard work for nothing. Now, I wouldn't say that's for nothing, but at that time, that's how I felt. And I know, you know, you, Billy, and your podcast, you know, listeners, they've had that experience that you've put all this hard work into something and it just doesn't pan out. So what I did in that moment was I knew that I had given up my entire social life for these grades that didn't matter and didn't count. So when I went to college, I was a chemical engineer. I went to Purdue University. And that first semester I went there, I decided that I was going to learn 2 things. I was going to learn how to drink beer and talk to the prettiest girl in the room.
Yes.
Now, having said that, that's so good. People go like, oh, that's so good. That's so cute. That's so great. If you're a wallflower, if you're really shy, that first semester was painful. And I would go to all the fraternity parties I could. And I would walk up to those pretty girls and I'd watch them cut me off from each other. I'd stumble over my words. I'd feel like an idiot. And that happened weekend over weekend over weekend. And I would just get up and go like, I'm gonna figure this out. Because what did I have? I mean, was I gonna work hard on my grades again? So I said, I gotta learn this. And over the course of the semester and into the next semester, I learned how to talk to not only the prettiest girl in the room, but what I learned from that was how to be confident in myself and my body and my skin. I learned how to talk to people in rooms. And so even to this day, with my consulting career, CEOs of global 100 companies don't scare me because they weren't as daunting as the prettiest girl in the room.
And you have a gorgeous wife, Patrick. You do. I've met your wife at events. Your wife is gorgeous. You are, that's why I'm so excited for everybody to listen and just hopefully you're taking notes. Patrick has knowledge to share, but talking about a brilliant mind and somebody who studies hard and just phenomenal brain, obviously. But he has figured out how to blur that line between the left and right hemisphere and kind of walk the spiritualist side as the analytical side and how to blend them and to be analytical, but that's my question for you, I guess, what I want to say, brother, is how do you take from the thinking and the cognitive part of it, where we're in this physical time, right? We're trapped in this time. We have this time. We get focused on past and future, but how do you transmute the thoughts and the cognition and all the thinking and the doing into being? Because I find that you are a master at this, because you are a brilliant consultant. You work with Accenture, you work with you make these huge merger deals happen. You're so smart and sharp, and you're probably a genius if you were rated. But it's so rare that people can take the thinking mind and kind of transmute that in this alchemical process of turning it into spirit, into being, and then taking that power and then sharing it out. That you're so good at that. So teach us how you do that, oh wise one.
So good. So thank you. So I'll launch into another story, and this is from college too. And I will say that those years were formative for me and really helped launch me into what I do. So when I was a chemical engineer, the last year at Purdue, everybody had to take a physical education credit. And so my colleagues, my friends took volleyball, or they took martial arts like judo or something like that. And at the time, we were just, past the Vietnam War and stuff like that. So I didn't want anything on my record that said I knew martial arts and knew how to fight. There's a whole backstory as to why that's important to me. and I didn't want to just take volleyball. So I took Ballet 1. And I don't know why, I just did. I took Ballet 1. And I walked into Ballet 1 class. And this is when I'm a senior. I'm a chemical engineer. And I'm taking a Ballet 1 class, and I walk in, and there's 31, 32 women in the room taking Ballet 1. And they're all taking Ballet 1 because I only studied ballet for 7 years, and I did my recitals and all that. And I was just like, has no one in here ever just starting from scratch? It's like, no. So not only was I the only guy, I was the only one really taking Ballet 1.
Wow.
But here's what I learned from that. And to answer your question, Billy, I would come out of a physics test, and I wasn't very good at physics. And so I'd get I was thinking, I hope I get a D on that quiz or that test. And I'd walk into, and I'd have to go into a ballet class. And there I am taking off my chemical engineering student clothes, and I'm putting on my ballet clothes. I always thought about that like a knight putting armor on before they go to battle. So the preparation of that. And then I'd go into the dance studio, all wooden floors, mirrors up. And as soon as my hand touched the bar, everything about physics and chemical engineering dropped out of my body through the floorboards. Because in order to do the perfect plie, it requires 100% of your mind, body, and soul. And what a great lesson that was for me to go in there and to be able to drain all the angst of that part of the world, my left brain world, if you will, and go in and go totally to a right brain world, where it was the art, it was the beauty. But the bridge of that chemical engineering was so similar to ballet in terms of its discipline. It was just different parts of the brain, I guess. So I guess that's my tip for people, is have those transitions that you can go from that left brain logic part that just pulls us into do, and then have a thing that you can transition into just be. And for me, one of those things is breath, just breath. And here's one thing that I learned, as you know, Billy, and that's another whole part of my story, but I have cardiac obstructive pulmonary disease. I have a lung disease. And that's so formative to me too. I'm grateful for that in some ways too, for that, because it's given me so many gifts. And here's one gift, is that I've learned that breath, when you breathe high in your lungs, that's the breath you use to tell your body you're in fear.
Mm.
And when you do diaphragmatic breathing, that's you're telling your body you're in serene mode or harmony mode.
Oh, I love that.
So that bridge between those two, I said, I got to change my clothes. I got into dance clothes. That was all great. And we have those transitions, but now I have these transitions that are 10 seconds between the two. And it's just, okay, now I'm here.
That is so beautiful and so simple and so perfect. I hope if you're writing that down, remember it's because, wisdom is so obvious. Sometimes you forget it. And, and our friend, Brendan Burchard, I want to coin one of his famous quotes. He says, common knowledge is not common practice, right? Or common, right? We learn these common things and we just don't put them into everyday practice. You don't actually do them, but that is such a simple way. And, in my journey of I'm a spiritual sponge. I like to absorb and soak up all of this good stuff. And I've studied so many great teachers, and I've never heard it described so simply, because we were talking about what's a mechanism. You were using the bar for ballet, right? To trigger your left brain, to get out of left brain, to cross that hemisphere, go in the right brain, then kind of become one being, right? In the present moment, in this moment, connected. So anybody can do that. Your breath is that trigger. For me, it's like music. It's connection with art. It's connection with the soul and the universal oneness and the harmonic connection we all have. If I connect with music, for you at the time it was ballet, but anybody can connect to your breath at any time. And it's the same power that we all have. That oneness is in the present moment. But whoa, and your heart is right there, right? Your heart is right there next to your lungs. Your diaphragm is below your heart. What a great image, and what a great connecting point to get over there. Because a lot of people, when I'm working, coaching with clients, that's a big trick, is how do you get out of the thinking mind? How do you slow that monkey mind from jumping around from branch to branch to get, and yes, we try to get to the breath, but I love your imagery with that. Like I could just see you putting your hand on the bar and just like letting the world and the doing just kind of melt away. And to perform that plie, you have to be completely in the moment. You have to be completely surrendered to it, to pull it off to perfection, quote unquote perfection, because ballet is all about perfection, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And,
Yeah.
and it can be just as terrifying as a long to-do list. It can be just as terrifying as a golf swing, but if you're breathing into it, it just becomes beauty in motion. And that's why I love to dance so much, because it is just this beauty in motion if you let it be.
There, let it be, just like the Beatles. They had it right. Let it be. I love that song. That's the anthem. That should be everybody's anthem, playing in the background of your mind. Just let it be. Like, don't sweat it. Don't get so focused on the doing and having to compete with the Joneses and getting the stuff done and checking off your to-do list. Just be. Let it be. That is the peace. That's the moment that I love to play with. And when I feel myself out of it, I just know how to correct quickly. And what helps you correct quickly, other than those techniques? What are some other things that you do when you feel like the world, the energy of the world, especially in this last 2 years, this global, I call it the virus of fear. Yes, there's a physical virus, and I pray and have deep compassion for the people that have struggled. I personally struggled through this, but the virus of fear is the bigger ominous feature, I think, to this pandemic. What are other things you do to get out of the world and get into the moment and get into the spirit of the present, timeless moment?
So good. So good. So let me give you two of mine. One of them is pretty simple. One of my mantras, and Billy, I know you love mantras too. One of my mantras is live 100% empowered. I must say that over and over with myself. I use it when I do my work with folks. live 100% empowered. And I've studied that, looked at that, pulled it apart, analyzed it so deeply. Living 100% empowered means that no one's or no thing is going to take power away from me, my personal power.
Mm.
So I'm standing right here, and there could be an earthquake open up right underneath me, and it could just swallow me up. I'm not a victim to that earthquake because I decided me right to this space. And then the second one that I add to that, the universe is perfect.
Mm.
Not my view of it, not my slice of it, but the universe is perfect. It's moving everything exactly how it should be. So if an earthquake moves right here and I've decided myself right here, it's my time, and that's okay. So part of those two together, live 100% in power, and the universe is perfect. When my world isn't perfect, I remind myself, but the universe is. And if the universe is perfect, I must be perfectly placed, and I must have the perfect competencies to be in this space. So let's move forward. And the perfect competencies to be in the space may be that I fail miserably, because then I'll learn for the next time I'm in a space similar to that, that's bigger. And that's what evolution is.
That's beautiful.
So to me, if I put those two together, when things are really bad, I sit back and go like, okay, the universe is perfect, and I'm living 100% empowered. So what would a 100% empowered person do in this moment? And usually it's to step forward. It's usually not to go like, I don't know, I'm scared, which is a fear response. So in some ways too, I try to make all my decisions like eliminating the fear out of it, because it's in a sense that's illogical and inhumane to have that kind of fear baked into our decision.
I love that you bring up the F word, because that word is so, oh my gosh, fear. Like I said, it's the virus of fear. The bigger virus is the virus of fear. When you think, I do a lot of work with middle school kids, high school kids in their class. I was Zooming when, doing presentations on Zoom for them, because they're on the front lines. My daughter's 15, and going through this 12 to 16-year-old, the suicide rates have gone up like, I don't know, 350%. I've heard all these crazy numbers, but I know they're massive. There's the pandemic. There's an epidemic of fear, especially in that group. So my heart is just reaching out and trying to help these young minds who are they're all formative. They're in that formative place. When you have 2 years of fear as a society, as a negative energy field around this globe, it shapes you in a different way. So I'm trying with all my heart to focus my energy and my teaching into these young minds to teach them how to get out of fear, because fear, you need a past, you need a future. Stress needs a past, needs a future, but the present moment doesn't have any of that. The present moment is only here out of time, and there is no stress. I love Dr. Wayne Dyer. He says there's no such thing as stress. There's only people thinking stressful thoughts or fearful thoughts, I like to say as well. How, and I've also, Tony Robbins, love Tony Robbins. I learned back in 1989 when I read his book, Unlimited Power, he said, FEAR, false evidence appearing real. Fear, it's an acronym.
Yeah.
It's really just a story you're telling yourself. Tell yourself a different story. Focus, like you said, on something different. Use your present moment awareness along with your breath and your imagination, which I think is one of the greatest gifts we've ever been given, to get out of that fear and focus on what it is you want. How can you serve? How can you bring light and presence into this fear to dissolve it? It'll evaporate. If you realize it's a false evidence appearing real. How do you work with fear? Do you have any tips for them in your brilliant mind and your life and the time you spend on this planet dancing with fear? How do you box that ogre that is fear?
So good. And you brought up a number of, subtle metaphors of how I think about it. I think I have a model of fear, actually. It's funny that you brought this up. So I think of fear in the middle, like we have this emotional reaction, and it's fear. And my opinion, or my belief, is that you have 4 responses to fear, 4 possible responses to fear. And we know the psychological ones that they tell us, fight or flight. So we can fight. So you can get into that and you can fight. And boy, have we seen that in our culture. So we see fear rising up and people fight. So when I see the divisiveness in our culture right now, I have empathy, because I see, these people have so much fear and so much pain. And the only response they know is to fight. And it's like, okay, so I have empathy for that, even though it's divisive, and I have some, hip shoot reaction to that, to go like, it's like, no, back up. That's not helpful for them to fight back. So, and then there's flight. I can run from it. Well, gosh, I've talked to people too about the living in the middle edge. Over the last 2 years, it's hard to be in the middle because that's an edge that if you say something, one of the tails is going to just eat you alive. So we back up and we say, no, we're not going to say anything. Well, that's a flight response. And then as I thought about that, I was like, okay, great. But there's a third response, which is just as difficult or bad, is deer. The deer in the headlights, they freeze. So there's fight or flight, but then there's the freeze. And it's just like, oh, that's not helpful either. So what's the fourth response that I like to think of evolved, conscious human beings do? And it's flow. In that moment of fear, you just flow with it because the universe is perfect and you just flow with it. So what does that mean? Man, that could mean that you just move through it. It could mean that, and Billy, you and I have talked about this, maybe it's turning the other cheek, which is not fear, freezing, or fighting. Sometimes that's the right response. Sometimes it just says, just say what's in your heart, because the universe is going to feed you the right thing to say if you just let go into that. Not your ego, but just let the universe speak through you, and then you'll say the right things. And it may not feel right. You may not get the right response in that moment, but ultimately that's what the universe needs you to say. So that's flow. So when I think about that in those moments of fear, I go like, what's the flow here? And I think about this as not as, Yogi Berra had a great saying. It's like, when you see a fork in the road, take it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I could be wrong. I could take B and the right answer is A, but I'll correct on that. But the worst thing is to spin on the branch and the fork in the road. That doesn't go anywhere. So that's my response to that of fear is what do you do to flow in this moment?
I love that. I hope everybody wrote that down, either the notes on your phone or on your piece of paper, whatever you're writing on, write that down. Because I've worked with fear a lot and coached fear, but I've never heard anybody articulate like that, Patrick. I love that, because the flow, because it does, there's that autonomic that the nervous system just responds out of our caveman brain, right? If you heard it said many times about, or just this old 250,000-year-old brain or something like that, right? This brain that's just evolved through, but it hasn't really evolved. The fear response is always there trying to protect us, but it usually freezes us if we don't do anything. The flow is like stagnant water. I mean, if it's moving, it stays clear. If it's stagnant, right, it stagnates, it gets diseased, it gets muddy, it has to flow. And It's counterintuitive though, isn't it, Patrick? It's a little counterintuitive because you think protect, you have to almost go against your natural instinct because a lot of times it's not a life-threatening situation. Majority of times it's a bad email you got, or a bad call, or someone broke up with you, or a financial problem, or right, something happened, and we just make it the biggest thing in our life, and then they cascade, and then they kind of stack on each other, and then before you know it, you've got this new habit ingrained into your system, and you don't take any chances. You don't say yes anymore. You don't believe in just pushing through and growing, because I believe the unknown is where the growth is. And fear is usually what makes people think of the unknown. Oh my God, I don't want to go in the unknown. It's too scary. But that's where the growth is. You have to flow through it, as Patrick just taught us so brilliantly. You have to move through it. So what are some examples in your life where you've personally dealt with, use the flow to get out of situations? Because I love stories. You're a great storyteller. I love stories, because I think people see themselves in stories. Don't you?
So good. So good. So, I have a saying or an archetype actually of seeing the portals in the mist. And sometimes I'll go out in our yard in any season. Right now here in Minnesota, it's snowy. So I might go out there today after this and take off my shoes and socks and go stand on Mother Earth with my bare feet. Because remember, I used to be a dancer.
Yep.
And I'll just go out there and I'll go like, universe, help me to see the portals in the mist. And what I mean by that is we're so focused on getting from A to B. And so we're focused on that B. That's our to-do list, the thing, closing the big deal or whatever there is. And that's important. I mean, I'm not taking that out. But when we focus so much on B, that point B, we may miss the portals that the universe gives us along the sides.
Mm.
And so I call those portals in the mist because they're not really these huge portals that open up for us. They're just kind of, there's a mist there. But I want to be able to see those. And I'm not asking that I take every one of them, because that's kind of chasing shiny pennies too. So I'm not a shiny penny guy either. But let me just see them so I can discern whether that's something I want to take. And so when I think about a story along those lines, okay, we'll do this story. So because I was a dancer, one of my people that I danced with in college went to dance with the National Company of Norway in Oslo, but he was doing a lot of shamanic work. And so when he was coming back, and he was doing shamanic work with a little bit with the Lakota Indians in Pine Ridge Reservation, which is 9 hours west of us. And so he called me up one time and he said, hey, I'm going out to South Dakota, and do you want to go to this ceremony with me for a week in the Black Hills? And I was like, sure. There's a portal in the mist, right? So it's like, sure, I'll do that. So in the sense, it was easy for me in my corporate job to take a week off and go out to South Dakota. So we go to South Dakota, and wow, what a mind-blowing experience, right? So the first night we get there, we set up camp where you do a sweat lodge. And so sweat lodges are like, the easy way to describe it is like a Native American sauna, but it's a religious ceremony, a spiritual ceremony. So you go in there, stuff's happening and people are talking, and there were elders talking there all week. And so my mind was blown. At the end of the week, and that's not just the portal, here's the big portal. At the end of the week, my friend looks at me and says, hey, I'm going to now go to a 3-week ceremony deeper into Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Why don't you come with me? I was like, I can't just call up my job and say, let me take another 3 weeks off, because I wouldn't have a job. Now, the way he was like, and so? I was like, you know what I'm saying? I love my job. I have kids to put food on the table for, just like your listeners. So I said, no, I can't do that. So have a good time with that. But no. And then he looked at me and I said, well, will you try to come next year? And I said, sure, I'll try to come next year. And then this happened. He put his hand on my shoulder, and then he said, so on our friendship, you promised to try to come back next year. And there was this, something else came into the room in that moment. And I was like, that is a portal in the mist. And I was like, sure, I'll try. Great. So that was in July. December comes up, and we're on a call. We're catching up on stuff. This is like 30 years ago now. And he said, okay. And at the end of the call, he goes like, so are you going to come out to South Dakota with me for 3 weeks this coming summer? I was like, need to understand, it's hard for me to take 3 weeks off. I might get fired. It's just going to be really hard. Clients can't afford to have me gone. He goes, but have you tried? Because he didn't make me promise on coming. He just made me promise that I would try. I was like, I didn't. So in March, I get a message on my answering machine back in those days. And he called me up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot talk to him without trying. So I went into my client at the time and I said, look, I've been asked to do this ceremony in South Dakota for 3 weeks this summer. And it's going to be really hard for me to be away for that long. I'm in this critical role. That's a critical time. If you say no, that's okay. Now, I put every brick in that wall that I could have. And her name was Nancy. She said, and I was working at a hospital, doing a project at a hospital. And she said, it's okay. You should go. I was like, okay. So then I went to my boss at Accenture and I said, Andy, I've been asked to do this 3-week ceremony in South Dakota. The client said yes, but they're neophytes when it comes to working with consultants. They have no idea the role that I'm in, how important it is, how hard it's going to be for me to go away for 3 weeks. They just don't understand. So if you say no, totally fine with me. I'll tell the client no. Again, I'm like putting mortar now in those bricks and hoping that they cure before, the conversation's over. And then he gets up from behind his desk, walks around, turns me around, puts his arm on my shoulders and said, I was asked to go to safari when I was your age. And I said, no, I've regretted it ever since. You need to do this.
Wow.
And I was like,
There's the universe, right? There's the universe.
Right. The universe is perfect. And so this was one of those portals to take. And the universe wasn't going to take no for an answer.
No matter what, even though you tried your hardest.
I tried. And so I called up my friend. I said, I'm coming with you to South Dakota. And he was in Switzerland now. He's flying from Switzerland. And he had 10 people. So they all stayed at my house before we went out there. And we drove out to South Dakota. And we spent that 3 weeks in ceremony, participating in these ancient Lakota ceremonies. And I did that 3 weeks for 20 years after that.
Oh my gosh, Patrick.
Because it changed my life. And when I think about that too, I think about just like the bar when I was in chemical engineering and then going and taking ballet. This was the same thing. It's just that 49 weeks out of the year I was consulting, and 3 weeks out of the year I was at my other home in South Dakota. I had my hand on the bar. And,
wow.
and each one of those things fed the other.
Mm.
When I went out there, I didn't leave me behind when I went out there. I took my talents with me. I'm a really good organization consultant. So I helped them do things differently out there. But also when I did things out there, it changed radically how I did my work as a consultant.
Oh my gosh.
And so they fed each other. It was like a heart pumping one side versus the other. And so that kept me going for all those years. And in some ways, that's a long-winded story to your question, but it's like, and that's how I've dealt with fear of going through some of those portals. And then those things, those mechanisms in your life stick. And then you use those things to help you in those present moments to navigate which side should you be on. Should you be on your left brain or right brain? But you're always listening because the universe is always perfect.
Wow. Okay. I wish I was right on my phone right now typing all. Thank God I'm recording this. Hey, this is being recorded. So just think, you can go back, you can go to billymandarino.com, you can go to the podcast. Hey, real quick, we're going to talk about this at the end of our podcast, but can you tell me a little bit about where people could find you, since you just blew their minds with your brilliant knowledge, your just perfect takeaways? Implementation is so easy when you have simple tactics like that. Can you just tell them real quick how to get in touch with you if they want to be coached by you, if they want to follow you? I know you have the Wisdom Council coming up.
Okay, so a number of things that I've got going that way, which I love my work because it's not a business, it's a movement. It's a movement. And so my movement is Wisdom for Humanity, and that's the number 4, Wisdom for Humanity. And what that means is, don't you think we need a little bit more wisdom in the world now than ever before in our lives?
For sure.
And wisdom, to me, the definition of wisdom, I'm going to get to the contact information, but wisdom for me, the definition I use for that is the soundness of act or decision based on knowledge, experience, and good judgment. So I'll say it again. Wisdom is the soundness of act or decision based on knowledge, experience, and good judgment. The reason why I love that definition is because wisdom isn't something the Dalai Lama has and it's a mysterious thing that's off over here. Wisdom is act or decisions. It's in the world. It's active. And what I like about it too is the soundness. Soundness means 2 things. The soundness is how solid or stable it is. When you make a sound decision, you go through a gate and you don't go back. You don't spin on a decision, a wise decision. You move through it and it's done. And then also sound action means that you don't go back on that action. You just take the action, you move forward. And so that's what soundness is. But also soundness is soundness. It's what you hear. And so soundness is such an intimate thing. So even now as we're talking, man, what's so tremendous to me is to think about sound. When I'm talking, I'm rattling bones in your body. How much more intimate do you want to be than that? Yeah. I'm shaking your bones. Not just you, Billy, but these listeners that I don't even know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to respect that I'm putting that wisdom in the world and shaking those bones in people's bodies with stuff that helps humanity, moves us forward. And so that's why I love that definition. So my business, Wisdom for Humanity, my movement, Wisdom for Humanity, is how do you take acts or decisions and make them sound? And helping people with their business strategies, with their marketing strategies, with their spiritual health, with their personal health, whatever it takes to be those solid human beings where we promote wisdom for humanity. And the reason I have 4 in there is because I look at 4 generations back. What's the wisdom of my ancestors? What are my family stories? We could do another whole podcast on genealogical stories because they're so important. Even if you're adopted, it's like, wow, what are those stories that are getting passed on, those family values that are in your body? Mm-hmm. And then I think about 4 generations back. And my 4 generations back for me was Ellen Hurley, who stood on a dock in Ireland during the potato blight and got on a boat when she was 11 and came to the States in 1859. Wow. Right into the Civil War.
Oh my God.
Here's the thing that just blows my mind with wisdom for humanity is that I have a granddaughter and I have 2 grandsons, but I think about my granddaughter, Maddie. Her grandchildren are as far away from me as Ellen Hurley is from me.
Whoa.
4 generations back, 4 generations forward.
Mm.
So how am I bottling this wisdom that I have, these family stories, this podcast that we're doing? How do I bottle that up and build a better world for my granddaughter's grandkids? And that's what we're all here to do. So you can go out to my website, wisdomforhumanity.com. Very easy to get me there. And then if you want to reach out to me, easy to do, patrick@wisdomforhumanity.com, and just say, hey, I got it on that podcast. I'd love to chat with you because I think these authentic interactions that we have change the world.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
And I'll put one more thing out there with that is that, when we have these interactions with each other, if I can change the direction, and I remember I was a chemical engineer, so I think about this as the math of misdirection or misalignment or math of alignment, either way you want to look at it. But if I can have a conversation with you that course adjusts your alignment with your mission by 0.5 degrees, in 10 years, you're in a different universe than you are today.
Oh, yeah.
So these conversations, even if you just wrote down, yeah, the universe is perfect. And if you just take one fear moment and you go like, and you take that pause and you take that breath and you go like, and then you respond differently, boom, you've altered the course of human history. That's wisdom for humanity. So come visit me at that. And so I do, so that's my website, but as Billy mentioned, I have a wisdom council. So I gather people at sacred sites all over the world for 4 days. In 2018, I took people to Machu Picchu for 4 days, and we talked about life mission. And my belief is that you think about your life mission differently in Machu Picchu than you do in the basin of a Marriott here in Minneapolis. It's just going to be different. Your molecules will assemble differently there.
Truly.
So this year we're going to Delphi, Greece to talk to the Delphi Oracle.
Oh my God.
We'll talk about that too. And we've been to Glendalough, Ireland, where St. Kevin did his work in the 6th century AD. So that's one of my life missions too, is to go to these sacred places all over the world and take people with me. And let's revision the world that we live in. So those are some of the things that I do. And I work with people one-on-one. I have a monthly program, other things too, but you can catch that all on my website.
Oh my gosh, Patrick. So people, friends, souls, like-minded spirits, please, you can talk to Patrick just like I'm talking to Patrick right now. He's so approachable. Man, when I first met him like 4 years ago, I think 2018, everybody loves Patrick. Everybody connects to Patrick. So I want you to connect with Patrick, because what you learned in this 50-minute podcast, just imagine if you spent a few of those with him, or if you did it consistently, or on a monthly call, or on a weekly call. Just that one little, like you talked, that little direction, that just small little 0.05 or whatever the percentage of that direction shift that you could take. If you're consistent, you create new rituals, new habits, new ways of being in your life. Wow, you're gonna not recognize yourself. Like the body that's listening to this right now, and not that long a time, is going to be different than the body that listened to this. And that's what it's about. It's about evolution. It's about upregulating this within our soul, within our being, within our spirit. and within our bodies. I mean, there's this epigenetic expression that happens in your body when you change the energy field of your body. That's what we're both about, because I love the fact that you've been to these sweat lodges, and we've talked about this many times before. I'm so fascinated by the mystical, by the unknown. Like I said, it's where the growth is, and I just love it. Some people are afraid to go to that unknown. I kind of go to it intuitively and instinctively. I just like, yes, what don't I know? I want to learn more. Well, you can tell by our conversation today that Patrick can go deep, and he can go deep in an approachable way. And that's what I love about you so much, Patrick, is so approachable. It seems like it's heady, but it's approachable, it's usable, it's implementable, if that's a word. You can easily just bring this into your life, and then you can change your direction without this crazy 700-page book that you have to read. It's a small new ritual you start every day, every night, before you go to bed, when you wake up in the morning. Just the power of your attention, the power of your intention, the power of your present moment awareness can shift everything. So before we go, I want to talk to, or ask you, sorry, because you know me, I love the unknown, I love the mystical, I love the sacred. I love that you're going to the Oracle of Delphi. Oh my gosh, one of the most sacred places on the planet. Do you have any, before we go, a mystical, crazy story? Like, I think of Dr. Joe Dispenza. You know who Dr. Joe Dispenza is? Just, he has these incredible 7-day retreats in Cancun, London. He goes all over the world. There's about 1,000 people in a ballroom. And this is probably going to blow some of your minds. And I've never shared this on a podcast before. And he shares it on YouTube a little bit, but they kind of brush it under the rug. But this is the kind of stuff that really lights me up. So many people, 1,000 people resonating in coherent energy in this ballroom for 7 days. Some of them are meditating for 50 hours in this time. Imagine how that room is physically and energetically different. Like, they reach these quantum levels of energy that we don't really get in physical normal time, average time. And these beings, and this is kind of crazy, and I bring this up because I imagine you're in these sweat lodges and you experience different realms of consciousness, different layers or levels, if you will, of higher levels of consciousness. Rumi said, when you're born, a ladder is placed before you to escape this world. And I feel like what Patrick's talking about, I know the work Dr. Joe does is about going up these rungs at higher levels of consciousness. So Dr. Joe says that these actual beings show up in the room from higher realms of consciousness, because you are in their level, you're in their frequency, so they can finally communicate with you. Why do you think when you're asleep and you're in this semi-somnolent subconscious state, when you're totally in this low delta brainwave frequency, do your relatives visit you? Your grandma, your dad, your past relatives will visit you, and you think, oh my gosh, I had a dream about them. No, you're actually with them in their frequency. So what kind of frequencies and what kind of experiences, briefly, can you tell us? I know it's a huge question for 5 minutes, but I really want to know about one that you've had, and you've been 20 years of sweat lodges,
Yes.
which is, it's like going into this crazy deep meditation where you're out of physical time. Are you not? You're in a different realm.
Yes, I guess that's a way to describe it. Yes.
And I've never done a sweat lodge, but this is the master. I want the viewers, listeners, to just glean a little bit of what that is like for a physical, spiritual, if you will, experience. Because this podcast, I was so excited to have this podcast with you, because I think you're the master of taking the conscious mind and crossing that membrane between the left and right brain and blurring it all together and becoming one whole being in this oneness. And although you're a brilliant mind, you don't let that keep you out of that other hemisphere.
Right.
And so in this final story, I just wanted to kind of bring it all home with a mystical spiritual experience that you can explain, that you experienced, that I just love it. So maybe this is mostly for me, because I just love the unknown so much. So does anything come through to you, speaking of mystical or spiritual? You're getting any downloads right now?
Yeah. So as you were giving me a long time, which is good, to like, which of these things should I bring up? And it could be this one, it could be that one. Let's go here. Let's go here. And I'll say, Billy, there's a part of me that says there's safe ones to bring up, and then there's ones that are on the edge. We're going to the edge, folks. So here we go.
You have to. That's the unknown. The unknown is on the edge.
So I was in ceremony in South Dakota, and I'm going to try to do this in 5 minutes or less, but this could be 5-hour description. But I was in ceremony in South Dakota, and I was in the ceremony. It's a 4-day ceremony. And in this ceremony, you basically are in the ceremony from sunup to sundown. You're in the sun, so since it's in the summertime, so there's been recorded 116 degrees Fahrenheit out there, so it's hot. And over the course of those 4 days, you don't get any food or water.
Wow.
So on the third day, we were out there, and you're praying. You have to go in with an intent, or else you just crumble. So I had this intent as I was doing this ceremony. And on the third day in the afternoon, it was particularly hot. And we were there. And I'm not going to go into all the details of the ceremony, but I was standing there, and I was really, locked into this moment. And I was looking out there, and, I'm in South Dakota. So just imagine the prairie of South Dakota. And there's a native drum, right? So they're drumming, they're singing a song. If you've ever heard powwow music, put that music in your head about what that's like. It's high pitched, and it's loud, and it's right there. And so there's other people doing this. And so you're in this community of people, and there's helpers there supporting you. So you're on this altar, this beautiful altar. So you don't have to think about food or water or dropping or passing out or anything, because you'll be taken care of. So in that moment, and imagine that after 3 or 4 days, is that I imagine that how I describe it is you become more of a spirit being than a bodily being. And so you're there in spirit, and you're more spirit than anything else. And so I was sitting there leaning back, and I was like seeing everything. And all of a sudden there was a pop like that. And what I was seeing was no longer what was in front of me. I was seeing, it was dark all around me, and it was like stars or these bright lights all around me. Now, I wanted to say too, this was not an out-of-body experience. So, there's a lot of shamanic work of like leaving your body. I was totally in my body. I could feel it. I could hear the music, but also I was in this other place at the same time. Now, this sounds really bizarre, but that's just how it was for me. And I felt that this was the universe. I was gifted a picture of the universe. And in that moment, all these lights that I saw were all the souls on the planet and in the universe. And in that moment, I could understand each word, each thought that each of those entities had, each soul had. And I felt totally in union and harmony with everything. And then there's a word that they use in South Dakota to move on to the next thing, Hoka. And all of a sudden I just saw everything again. I was like, okay, here we are. We're back here. Got it. Okay. So, and to your point, Billy, and I know because I know how long the time is between those Hokas, how much time that was, but it could have been 17 hours for all I knew, because time wasn't relevant in that moment. So that was my experience of something otherworldly, if you will. But also, let me share this with you too, in your group, is that that was a slice of heaven. It's the best I can describe it. I don't know what other religions or spiritual practices call it, nirvana, but I felt in total harmony with everything, because I heard all those soul spirit voices, and they were all with me. And so that was a gift given to me 1995. And since then, I've been able to live into that moment. I know, and I have a saying over my desk that says, what if we died and went to heaven and didn't notice a difference?
Ooh.
And when I say that to people, go like, oh my God, the world we're in, this would be, oh, then we must be in, heaven must be hell. And, I'm like, no. We get those glimpses of heaven all the time. And I describe it to women who have children. I go like, when they place that baby in your arms, what was that feeling? And they're like,
yes,
it's indescribable love. And I'm like, that's heaven. You got a glimpse of heaven. So our lives are just these pearls strung together of these feelings and coming to heaven. Some of them are huge. Some of them are these little pearls. And so that's what I share with you, is that was a gift to me. And I share with you my story, but also my story is your story, because we've all had those moments of heaven. And our job from cradle to grave is to create more of those for ourselves and for our children, our families, and for each other, to create more of those moments of heaven. And that's what Wisdom for Humanity is all about. So
Oh my
here's
God.
my story.
Whoa.
Thank you.
Oh my God, Patrick, that was just like life-changing for me, life-changing for everybody that was lucky enough to view this and to listen to this. Please go to wisdomforhumanity.com to connect with Patrick at wisdomforhumanity.com to go deeper with this fine, angelic, humble, powerful soul that is my brother, Patrick Mosier. And thank you so much for being with us today. We're going to do this again sometime, because this was just, for me, the definition of being in the present moment. And being a Nowist, living in present moment awareness, is letting everything be. Like you said, we have to let this be. So wherever you are today, we both want to wish you all the blessed. We want to send you peace and love. But more importantly, today, why don't you go find somebody? And Mother Teresa always used to say this when she was on radio shows. She'd say, find somebody that thinks they're alone and convince them they're not. So I'd like to leave you all with that today. Just find somebody that cannot repay you, not even with a thank you. Just give them an offer of kindness, or teach them about something you learned today, or just be there for them and listen and teach them to know that they're not alone. So wherever you are, thank you so much. Patrick, my brother, thank you so much. This has been absolute magic. And wherever you are today, we just both send you peace.
Peace.